Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Vagabond VC podcast. Excited today to announce my guest, Bernardo Cordero. He is the co-founder of Flat, based in Mexico City. Today, Bernardo is going to be talking to us about his company, some of the property and real estate trends in Mexico and Latin America, and also his perspective on building and investing in companies in the Latin American region. So, Bernardo, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me. Happy to be here.
So I want to talk to you about Flat. Flat is a PropTech startup, as we like to basically join words together. So property technology. I'd like to talk about the market opportunity that you see there in Mexico and why you built the company.
Yeah. So, when we were investing in FinTech before, so both my co-founder and myself, Victor, and we were doing a lot of stuff in FinTech, and we started to look a lot at the PropTech market, and we started to talk to customers on the ground. And it was pretty amazing what was happening there. We found the problem that was worse than the financial sector. That's hard to find. And yeah, we started to talk to customers, and we started to realize that in Mexico, it can take you anywhere from 6 months to 2 years to sell a property. It's a complete nightmare, right? And it's not just one part of the process. It's almost everything, right? It's a market that doesn't have information. So there's no available data on property closings. It's a market that you don't have to necessarily be certified to be a broker. So there's some amazing brokers out there, but it's also a very fragmented market. The whole operational process of closing through notaries, getting a mortgage is extremely complex. So when you put all of that together, in order to sell your home, you have to be a combination of almost everything. You have to be a lawyer, you have to be an accountant, you have to be a salesperson, and you have to be an architect to try to sell your home. And yeah, the problem was so big that the more we looked at it, the more we fell in love with the idea of executing a project there. And we felt that the best way to enter the market was with a product that was so radically different to what customers were accustomed to. And that's iBuying, right? So taking those 6 months to 2 years and all of a sudden changing that to a matter of days, we felt was an amazing value proposition for customers.
So I was reading, and I believe it is correct that you actually shorten that process down to 10 days on average. Is that right?
That's right. So at the end of the day, with iBuyer, what we do is we buy homes instantly, and we do that in a matter of 10 days. Then we remodel the homes, and then we resell them. And that's basically the process that we go through.
And how do you do the remodeling process? Are there contractors that you guys are partnered with and you guys are taking care of the fee, or is the seller of the home taking care of the fee of the remodeling? How does that work?
Well, what we do is we have an internal team of architects. So we brought in our lead architect from, he came from two of the biggest architectural firms in the country. And he's put together a team for us. And we focus on doing, when we purchase a property, we'll do the design of what we want to do on the remodeling. And then after we have the design ready, we'll push that off to a group of contractors. So basically, we're creating a marketplace of contractors that are constantly bidding for our projects. And the reason we have it set up this way is that by doing the design internally, we can have one same vision across different inventory. We can do things like buying materials in bulk, et cetera. But then by doing the marketplace, so the contractors are constantly bidding, that allows us also to scale the business much easier and have contractors constantly competing for those projects. And that allows us to grow the business on that end much faster than if we tried to do the remodeling all in-house.
How do you recruit these contractors that are operating in this marketplace, and what kind of parameters are you using to gauge whether or not they deserve your business? For example, reviews on them to make sure that they are actually a contractor that's not going to mess something up based on the designs you've prepared. What does that process look like?
Yeah, so I would love to say that there's a bunch of online reviews of contractors in the country, but honestly, it doesn't exist. So usually our lead generation there comes from two places. It's either inbound, where contractors are coming to Flat to try to get work, or it's outbound, where we can find contractors in different channels. There are some online channels where we find them. Offline, there's places where we can look for them. But at the end of the day, what I would say is that the best place is within our after doing that initial vetting process. Our projects are really quick, right? So these are 3-4 week projects. So we have very quick feedback loop on who's doing a good job and who's not doing a good job. And that allows us, as we grow, to be able to have better and better contractors, have better quality, have better pricing, et cetera. So similar to what you would find in an Uber type business, right? Where you have third parties coming on the platform. And as they give their service, since they're not 1 year projects, we're able to have that very fast feedback loop on who's doing a good job and who's not.
What's interesting is that when reviewing your company, most of the things I've seen are based around the actual exchange of property, right? The home buyers and the home sellers. But another big aspect of this, if you're decreasing that turnaround time, which therefore gets more houses turned around on the market faster, you're actually giving more employment opportunities to these contractors. So beyond the jobs you're creating internally at Flat by growing the company, you're also creating many more employment opportunities for others in that industry by creating this, right?
No, that's a great point, and it's actually not something we're asked a lot about, but it's a huge part of what we're doing. No, and especially in Mexico, I'd say over the last 1 or 2 years, the new development construction has slowed down. At the same time as we've been growing our business, we've been able to create those jobs for the sector. A lot of buyers, because of the trust issue between buyers and sellers, we're moving much faster towards that new development segment. So they were buying more new homes than they were buying used homes. And I think our ability to come in, remodel these homes, kind of go through that legal process, inspection process, et cetera, we're creating that trust structure again with those used properties. And that allows us to bring in that used inventory back into the market, allows us to give more jobs to those contractors that are helping us to remodel and really create a segment and grow a segment that wasn't there.
On that note about trends in new home construction, speaking purely from the perspective of the US, and I'm curious to bounce these two markets off of each other, what we've seen in the last couple of years as well, especially in the last year, is our mortgage rates have significantly decreased to all-time lows. And part of this is due to COVID as well, which is the manufacturing of raw materials and the new home constructions have also been low compared to the demand for new houses. So with that, our home prices have completely skyrocketed. Are you seeing that same with this shortage of new home constructions? Are you seeing these same trends in Mexico and the broader Latin American region as well, where home prices are continuing to rise? And how, if so, how is that affecting some of the aspects of your business in terms of selling and buying houses?
No, so I'd say we're in a bit different cycle than what you're seeing in the US. I mean, we had come off of a pretty long cycle of home prices increasing steadily. Then I'd say over the last 2 years, especially over the last year with COVID, prices have been very stable. No? So prices have stopped increasing. But that coupled with, we have seen interest rates going down in the market with that focus of incentivizing the economy and getting the economy going. So it's interesting because our business at the end of the day, we're market makers, right? And that means the business works at whatever end of the cycle you're in. Right now, we're more in a buyer's market where there's a lot of interest from sellers to move their properties. But that together with low interest rates allows us to work on both ends of the market there. As prices start to go up again, we will not be buying at as much discount as we're buying today, but we'll be selling at a premium. So again, any type of market that we're working in, at the end of the day, what we are is a market maker. And I think that helps to give a vision of how the business works at any economic cycle.
Yeah, that makes sense. Who is buying these houses? Is your client base pretty diverse, or is there a specific group that is buying and selling homes? Another thing we're seeing here, well, we were seeing here over the last few years, was that younger people were not able to buy property. Some of that was due to being saddled with student loan debt, things like that. But also another trend that's happening, at least with COVID, where people were leaving cities. So a lot of people who were renting apartments or things like that moved to more rural areas and with their families to buy property outside of cities. So that's changed the landscape of who was buying houses. Who was buying houses in Mexico and Latin America?
Yeah, so for our business specifically, around 60% of the sales that we do are our direct digital channels, where we'll bring them in from one of the digital channels where we do marketing, bring them onto a site. They'll set a visit directly on Flat, and then we'll close with one of our scouts. And since we're so strong on that digital channel, I would say most of our buyers are more tech savvy users. They're usually younger couples that are buying their first home. are growing their family. So that would be our typical buyer today if we had to create one segment of buyer. No, but obviously once you go into the whole pool of buyers that they're buying from today, it's very, very diverse. But I would say that's the most typical buyer that we have today. Then you talked a little bit about kind of the movement in going outside of bigger cities that you're seeing in the US. To compare that to Mexico, I mean, it is happening. I would say it happens much more at the higher end segment where people have the ability to move out of the big cities and go places an hour, 2 hour away from where they're traditionally working. We don't see that much in the middle class and the traditional buyer. Most people in Mexico aren't working for tech companies in the same way they're working at tech companies in San Francisco, Seattle, cities like that in the US. So there is some movement like that, but it's definitely not as marked as you will see it in the US.
Sure, it's tied to the ability to do work remotely, right? Which might not be as prevalent in Mexico. How about trends with rental properties, Airbnb, which has unlocked a market for people to buy homes and then just rent them out, right? Do you see a lot of buyers buying second homes specifically to be a rental property and more like an investment opportunity? Is that a trend that's happening down there as well? And if so, how is that changing the landscape of, who's buying and how they're buying these houses?
Yeah, I mean, we'll see how that evolves. Without a doubt, it was a huge trend, especially in Mexico City. A lot of homes in central areas were being purchased to put up on Airbnb and similars. Definitely COVID put a halt on it. And for sure that'll come back, right? But I would say that market slowed down a lot over the last year, and it's starting to come back, and it'll for sure be a huge portion of the market as we go forward. But I think a lot of that depends on how fast we can get out of COVID.
Your business has been compared to several others. I think one of the biggest problems with comparisons is that they're always talking about how these businesses are the same. But I know you like to make a point about how your business is differentiated from many of the other property technology companies that are out there. So what separates you from your competition or other businesses in other regions?
Yeah. So I would say I've been a part of a lot of tech businesses that have their similars outside of Mexico or outside of Latin America. And when you look at it from afar, they seem more similar than they actually are. No, once you get into the nuts and bolts and you try to understand what's behind them, there's huge differences from how you have to execute them. This one in particular, what we're doing at Flat, I would say even more so. It's a business that we think not only translates well to Mexico and Latin America, we feel that it's a business that works even better. And we feel it works even better for several reasons, right? The first one I would say is the problem is much worse. We talked a little bit about the beginning, those 6 months to 2 years to try to sell a home, the issues with liquidity. It's a much bigger problem to solve. And when on top of that, you solve things like there's no MLS in the market, so there's no central repository of data, that adds another layer. So when you combine the fact that we can create an MLS, we can create liquidity that solves a bigger issue in the market. It's a market with operational issues that are more complex, and we could add technology to that to improve it. And you look at all those details, you can see that it's a business that scales really well in the market, that you can do it with much better margins, and then at the same time allows you to have a much broader approach to what you're able to execute.
Recently, I did an episode with Jaguar Ventures, and we were talking about just in general some of the problem areas in Latin America where many companies will arise to kind of tackle that same problem, which leads to a lot of companies in the same vertical and sector. How do you view competition that might be arising in, say, Colombia or Brazil or other spots in Latin America? Based on this market, how are you approaching the way your company scales and the competitive landscape?
Yeah, good question. So I'd say there's still a need for a lot more companies and a lot more competition, right? There's still very few of us, especially when we're talking about PropTech. So I mentioned it quickly at the beginning, but before Flat, we were FinTech investors. And when we saw the landscape in FinTech 4 or 5 years ago, it's very similar to what we're seeing in PropTech today. It was wide open space in the local market. You see FinTech today, and it's packed, both on the entrepreneur side, on the capital side. tons of different players going after similar plays. And in PropTech, we're very, very far from that. So I'd say there's still space for a ton of other competitors. There's a lot of space for a lot of different verticals to still execute on. So I say we're very early on. Our vision is that it's a business that requires a lot of local knowledge. We always say that there are businesses like Spotify, for example, where the product that you're putting in Mexico is very similar to the product that works in the US or some other market or works in Europe. This product requires a lot of execution on the ground. And that means that the local players have a distinct advantage to execute and grow. So I think that combination puts us in a great position of a blue ocean market, first mover advantage, and the ability to execute on something where we can have our operational expertise on the ground.
To talk about your background a bit, because you've mentioned before starting Flat that you were also in FinTech and doing an investor, because you were investing through Strategy, which is a venture builder, and that's where you focus most of your FinTech investments. I'd like to talk a little bit about your experience helping build these and fund these ventures in Mexico. And from the other side of the table, right? What is your view on the venture investing landscape in Mexico? And, feel free to highlight any of the portfolio companies that you have in there as well. I'd love to hear, how that worked into your ability to fundraise with Flat as well.
Absolutely. So things have been moving fast on the venture side in the region, without a doubt. So we started Strategy end of 2016, and at that time there was not I would say enough capital for what was going on. It's always a chicken and egg, right? I think it was both not enough capital and not enough entrepreneurs going after different opportunities. So when we saw that, we decided we had to be at the earliest stage. All the investments we made through Strategy, we were first checks into these companies. And we were first check into those companies because we felt that we had to be a support for those entrepreneurs that were building their first tech companies. I had come from experience operating from launching Linio a few years back. So coupled with the fact that there was not enough capital, there was not enough experience, being at that early stage allowed us to help some of those entrepreneurs grow. And that's why we started with that vision. I think the vision also has to evolve as the market evolves. So at the beginning, I would say that we were much more hands-on than we were on with the last investments that we did as the market and entrepreneurs evolved, et cetera. We made some amazing investments. I think we got lucky with several of them. We invested in a company called Worky. They have an HR platform that is similar to a Zenefits or a Namely type model. We invested in Clar, which is a challenger bank. We also invested in Belva, which is an open banking solution. So really excited about the portfolio and where it's going.
Great. I'll include links to Strategy in the show notes as well, so people can check out what you guys have been doing in there and some of the portfolio companies. Well, on the funding side for Flat as well, given that you mentioned that you had started Linio and then you were also doing the venture side, so you have previous entrepreneurship experience, you have previous funding experience, and you start Flat. And I think it shows that having both of those experiences have definitely helped you execute, because you have seen a lot of success in the time you've been around. In 2019, AllVP led your $4.6 million pre-seed round, which at the time was one of Mexico's biggest pre-seed rounds. You also graduated from YCombinator's Summer 2020 program. And then just recently, you raised $25 million in debt financing. So I'd like to hear your story about fundraising for Flat and how those experiences have helped you, and any kind of key takeaways that you think would help entrepreneurs in Mexico when they're considering fundraising, how to go about it.
So Flat is a bit of a different business model than the typical startup, right? The MVP for us is we had to buy homes.
Sure.
So you can't bootstrap buying properties.
Right. It's capital intensive, right?
Exactly. So that's why we had to start with that strong financing at the beginning. And without a doubt, I think our experience, both on already operating a large tech company, plus having gone through being on the investor side, was a huge help, right? Because you speak you speak both languages, and I think that helps throughout the process. And I think we're very successful at that initial raise and what we've been doing so far. And then going into recommendations, I mean, it's always hard because every story is different. But I was hearing actually a podcast the other day, and I can't remember exactly who they were interviewing, but they had raised a crazy round. No, I think they did in like 3 weeks. They had raised a PowerPoint round of 25 million, and they're asking them, "Hey, how could you raise in 3 weeks 25 million off of PowerPoint?" And the answer was very good, right? Because the answer was, it didn't really take me 3 weeks. It took me 7 years, because 7 years ago, I started working at a tech company, got experience there for 2 years. And then I started my first company, did horribly at that, but learned a lot, but that failed. And then I started another one. I was actually somewhat successful, sold that. And then I started this one. And that allowed me to raise in 3 weeks, 25 million. I think when going back to your question on recommendations, I think it's just getting started in the direction that you want to go, right? And if your vision is, hey, I want to build a unicorn someday, it doesn't mean tomorrow you have to start executing on that company. It might mean that you start from, okay, let me work at a tech company, understand what's going on there, and let me try some company to see how that works. And then you start going from there. But everyone's path is different, right? Someone's path might be, okay, tomorrow I'm going to start my unicorn and it's successful and that's the way it goes. Others it isn't. But I think it's just getting on that path and getting to that point where you set yourself up for success.
Yeah, that's an interesting way to put it. I think, actually to make a parallel with venture funding, which is typically you get a certain amount to meet certain milestones and then raise more at a higher valuation, right? Similarly, from a personal experience, you might want to set personal milestones to help you get the right operational experience to then execute on building a company. So whether it be, yes, I'll work at a startup for 18 months or however long, and get that experience to then do the venture side. And then, so milestones to hit to help your own personal development to get in a position to be fundraising, right?
Absolutely.
Why, I'm curious to know then, you, for the 25 million debt financing, why did you go that route versus equity?
Yeah. So at the end of the day, we have to grow quickly on the amount of properties that we're purchasing, and using equity to finance the properties that we're buying. It's not the best way to use equity, right? At the end of the day, every equity dollar that we raise, that's dilution for us as founders and dilution for the rest of the team that has equity. So we have to be very careful with what we raise in equity and at what valuations, et cetera. And debt in this business is what really gives you the gas to grow without having to dilute the team as we do that.
Yeah. And speaking of the team, because you guys have been growing so much, I don't know what your current headcount's at and how much it's grown over the last 2 years, but what has that experience been like expanding the team, not only onboarding talent, what is the talent quality there in Mexico, and how do you maintain some of the culture that you've had to begin and the vision that you've had to begin this company? How do you maintain that as you grow and scale the team quickly?
So I think a lot of what we've done in the past, both Victor and myself, has been around building teams and really functioning together with talent. So at Lino, we grew to over 2,000 people, right? In Mexico office, which I was leading, we were over 1,000 at some point. Its strategy, a lot of Vic's job was to bring in tech talent and help companies bring in some of that talent onto their companies. And I think we brought a lot of that over to Flat. It's no secret, right? That tech companies and businesses like we're building, they're built off of talent. There's no other answer to getting to where we want to be. So a lot of our focus has been there from the beginning. There's definitely a much bigger talent pool in the country than was there 10 years ago. So I think that's helped. And I think our focus there is usually hiring for what you can't teach, right? And that's something we talk a lot about internally. You can't teach people to be hungry. You can't teach people to want to change sectors and want to do things differently. You can teach people marketing. You can teach people operations. And that's why we always hire with that vision. And I think that's one of the things we did right when I was at Lean. I think that's something that we're bringing here and that I think we're doing right at Flat.
Yeah. So it's more so those, the personality of the person and knowing how engaged and how ambitious they might be, any of the actual hard skills, like you mentioned, like, okay, teaching them the operational side or something, they can learn that. But as long as they come with the drive, that's what matters.
Absolutely. And then I'm obviously exaggerating in certain terms where at the end of the day, the right answer is always somewhere in between where you have to mix and match. We can't bring in our head architect that's doing remodelings of the properties and say, hey, it's okay if you don't have any experience. We'll show you here how to remodel properties. Or head of finance, you have to have a ton of experience there. But it's always that combination of how do you bring people with experience, but how do you make sure you're hiring people with the right frame of mind that will allow you to create something that doesn't exist in the market.
You mentioned that now there actually is quite a large talent pool in Mexico. So that certainly makes things easier. Some of the conversations I've had with individuals involved in the startup ecosystem in Mexico have said that that wasn't always the case, right? And things have been changing for the better, which is good. The trend's in the right direction. What are some things that, from your perspective, that led to more developers, operators, people who would actually be more interested in working in a startup? What are some things that have changed the mindset around working at a startup? And then what are some gaps that are still there that would maybe deter people from wanting to come and build a company?
So I'm very biased on this answer because I want to start from Linio. And as I said, I think we did a lot of things wrong. I think we did a lot of things right. But I think one of the things we did right was hiring amazing talent there. There's actually a study from Endeavor where there are 75 ex-Linio that have co-founded or started companies in Latin America. But that's only one example, right? I think that was kind of the start of it in Mexico, at least. But then you have companies like Uber coming in, what Rappi is doing, Mercado Libre in several countries. What we've seen from ex people from Oyo or WeWork. There's a lot of talent that have come from a lot of these big tech companies that have put in big bets on the country and on the region and allowed that talent to grow. So I think what ends up happening is that those first companies that started to invest and to hire that talent and to teach that talent has allowed a lot of the new startups to be able to build off of what they had done before. So I think from that perspective, what continues to deter talent? I would say if you're talented in countries like Mexico and you come from a privileged background in terms of education and where you were able to study and grow professionally, the amount of jobs that are out there waiting for you is huge, right? The ability to earn really good money at a huge company is fairly straightforward. And I think that's always the challenge for startups, right? Because the other end of the spectrum, there's just amazing jobs waiting for the talent there as well.
Sure. Speaking of, just people who have opportunities, your company did go through YCombinator, which is a very big stamp of approval globally. Are there any programs in Mexico that are similar to YCombinator that help founders with education, with networking, with learning skills to operate and grow their business? Are those platforms available there as well to help with the entrepreneurship ecosystem?
Yeah, absolutely. So to give you one example, and probably the best example locally, I would say 500 startups. There's a local 500 startups team that has been around for a while. I mean, I'm not sure exactly how many years, but probably around almost 10 years. And I think they've done a great job in the ecosystem to invest at the very early stage and to invest in big portfolios. So I think they're a really good example of what's happening there. I think you also see a lot of local companies starting to go to places like YC in the US. And I think that early stage will continue to develop.
Are you guys hiring right now? So anyone in my network can, help filter people your way, or what's kind of going on in that end?
As you're growing, we're always hiring. I think you asked it before and I didn't go into much detail. There's always going to be a challenge on the tech side, on the data science side of the business. It's definitely a resource as tech companies grow, as more capital is being put into the market, that it will always be a tough resource to find. So always interested in that tech talent, data science talent. But in general, we're hiring almost across the business.
I'll be sure to put out a social blast, have people check you out and go in and apply. It's just on your website, right?
That's right.
Okay. As we're getting towards the end of the program here, I would love to know your perspective on if you're looking out into the future, say 5 years, 10 years, where do you see Flat heading? I know you had plans to expand to several more cities this year, but even beyond that, how do you see the platform growing, whether it be regionally or even into other aspects of the real estate business? And then also the startup and venture ecosystem. How do you see that transforming in Mexico and Latin America as well?
So first, in terms of Flat, right now, I would say our approach is a bit two-way. One is in terms of geographic expansion. As you mentioned, we started being very concentrated. We moved all of Mexico City last year. We just launched Mexico State. We'll be launching a few other cities this year. Next year, the idea is to go into some of the second-tier cities within the country. And then the second part of it is also having a broad approach into what we're doing, right? So we're very focused on the iBuyer, but there are definitely other things that we can help customers through that end-to-end process. We're already doing some things on mortgage brokerage, and we'll be looking into some other verticals within our business as we grow. So both expanding geographically and then expanding in product offering, I think, is the way to go. As we move into the future, I'm sure there will be some opportunities for Spanish-speaking LATAM and some other countries that we could look at as we grow. Then in terms of the ecosystem, I think it's pretty amazing what's happening now. No, I mean, when we started Linio 2012, there was absolutely nothing in the market in terms of tech companies, very few VCs and very small locally, basically zero international VCs interested in Latin America. And I would say today that is radically different. No, I think what we've seen over the last 6 months, it's pretty incredible. And what I joke with some VCs is if you're not investing in Latin America, you're no longer cool. This is a place to be, and things are moving fast. And I think when we look at the ecosystem a few years down the line, it'll be pretty incredible how fast it's moved.
Yeah, that's kind of the point of this program too, is to get more people interested and get more money down there, right? So yeah, I completely agree. That's just not only is it currently popular, but I think that's where a lot of the innovation is really going to make a difference globally, looking outside of the US and to different markets, whether it be Latin America or even other emerging market regions, Africa and Asia and things like that.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible how what's happening is the innovation that's happening with tech here is you're just jumping several steps in evolution, right? So it makes it exciting because you're able to move things faster, much quicker. And when you talk about, you always hear in tech, okay, you have to create a solution which is 10x better. The ability to do that in markets like ours it's just much easier, right? Because we're going from a place that businesses aren't very efficient. There are a lot of monopolies in the market. There haven't been a lot of advances in some of these sectors that we're working in. So the ability to come in aggressively with new tech products allows you to have that 10x with a clear path.
Sure. Yeah, no, that's true. Okay, as we're finishing up, if people want to get in touch with you, what would be the best way? Are you active on social media, or how do you typically interact with individuals interested in Flat?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can find me on Twitter. So it's at Bern Cordero. That's usually the easiest way to either send me a message there. You can also send me an email, bernardo@flat.mx. Either works.
Great. I will put that information in the show notes as well. This has been really interesting. I, as someone in my 30s who's potentially planning on buying property at some point, it's always good to learn about what's going on in the market everywhere to see the trends. But also just because you guys have seen such an impressive amount of growth. And I know you've done a lot of press recently, and just the attention you've been getting has been really fantastic. And it's great to see the traction of the company go along with that. So I'm very excited to see where this heads. So I'd just like to thank you once again for your time today and your perspective on both your company and the broader ecosystem in Mexico. And that's it for today. So I appreciate it, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks so much for having me. We'd love to sell you a home anytime in Mexico when you're here, and looking forward to staying in touch.
I'll hopefully be down there sooner rather than later. So we'll go to our house.
That's good. Thanks so much.